On the show today, Kenya gets $750 million from World Bank to develop North region. Islamic Trade Financial Corporation signs $100 million deal. ECOWAS suspends launch of ECO single currency. And hello and welcome to Business Incorporated this afternoon. I'm Temple Ashaju. We'll begin with the numbers from major markets in Africa, which are mostly in the red zone at this point and of course at intraday, except South Africa's JSE, which rose by 0.73% after investors made do with the disappointing GDP numbers for the second quarter of 2020. And in Nigeria, the NSE fell by 0.10%, while Egypt's EGX30 also dropped by 0.39% at intraday. Kenya closed Tuesday's trading session negative, down by 0.47%. And major Gulf markets in the Middle East were in the negative territory at intraday, with Dubai's index losing 0.38%. Abu Dhabi's index also dipped by 0.04%, while elsewhere, Saudi Arabia's all-share index was lower by 0.52%, while the Qatari index dropped by 0.23%. And European stocks advanced this morning as investors looked to shrug off the technology-led rout in the U.S. that is putting pressure on financial markets around the world. Conrad Bosen joins us now from the Frankfurt Stock Exchange to give us some updates. Hi, Conrad. Good afternoon. Good to have you on the show. But a significant sell-off in American tech stocks continued on Tuesday. How are the markets in Europe weathering the storm at this point?
Quite well, I have to say, Temple. If you take the German index as, a point of reference, it's showing a lot of resilience in face of this sell-off in tech stocks in the United States. The Nasdaq Composite Index in the US has lost around about 10% since last Wednesday. In the same period of time, our index here has lost only around about 1%, which of course is due to the fact that the German index and the indices of other Western European countries do not really contain large tech firms like Facebook, Google, Apple, etc. So what's often seen as a disadvantage here in Germany, that we have not managed to create and grow large new technology firms, is now a bit of an advantage in terms of market stability. Let me also say that even though the sell-off in US tech stocks is really strong, Tesla alone, its shares on Tuesday, yesterday, lost more than 20% within one trading day. Most people on the markets are convinced that all this is temporary, that what we are seeing is a long overdue correction, and that often in the past, after such corrections, stocks have done well.
So, pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca has announced that it is pausing its COVID-19 vaccine trial due to a potentially unexplained illness in one of the trial volunteers. But how much of impact does this now have on the company's share price and, of course, other healthcare companies that are one way or the other related to COVID-19 vaccines?
All this has put a dent in the share price of AstraZeneca, but not a very big one. Experts, analysts for the pharma sector are convinced that it's very important that this vetting process, this experimental phase, be managed very thoroughly and with a strong focus on security. It's better to have no vaccine than a bad vaccine that maybe makes people ill who take it. In that context, it's worth mentioning that 9 companies which are all working on a corona vaccine have signed a declaration pledging to uphold scientific safety and efficacy standards for their experimental vaccines, despite the urgency to contain the pandemic. Still, the backlash for AstraZeneca has put some of its competitors a bit in some sort of advantage, or in other words, the advantage that AstraZeneca has had because it was so advanced in the race has been shrinking somewhat. All of the shares of the competitors of AstraZeneca in this race are gainers this Wednesday, some of them even big ones, including BioNTech and CureVac, which are the 2 German biotechs who are working on a vaccine.
I know you know that losses are actually necessary evil in the markets. No matter how low it goes, it's an opportunity for re-entry, actually. But Conrad, we know that Germany's Research Institute is warning that many businesses are considering giving up in-person trade fair. But this must be some kind of bad news, is it?
Yes, it's bad news, in particular, for cities here in Germany where so many trade fairs are regularly happening. Frankfurt, with its large trade fair, is often called the trade fair capital of Germany. So, of course, it's bad news for those cities that 39% of the companies which in the past have attended trade fairs are now planning to reduce this attendance. And in particular negative is that large companies are reconsidering their presence. Large companies are often the anchors, the important exhibitors that trigger demand from smaller companies. What I can tell you is that at least here in Frankfurt, the people in charge of the trade fair are now boosting communications with their customers in order to find out how to keep trade fairs important. It simply is not enough to hope that after the corona crisis, things will eventually, look like they have before this crisis.
We'll certainly get back to the pre-COVID-19 stage. Let's all remain optimistic about that. Conrad, thank you for your time, and do have yourself a lovely afternoon or whatever the time looks like over there. Let's head over now to London in the United Kingdom, where Juliana is waiting to give us some updates. Hi, Juliana. Thank you for joining us again on the program. What do we now know about Boris Johnson's announcement of a new lockdown rules?
Nothing much yet, Temple. The coronavirus press conference will be taking place at 4 p.m. local time. Prime Minister Boris Johnson will be joined by the Chief Scientific Officer, Sir Patrick Vallance, alongside the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, those three individuals that were standing together right when the lockdown started. And what we're expected to hear is the first time Boris Johnson is reversing the ease of lockdown measures. So at the moment in the UK, you can gather with different households up to 30 of you, both inside and outside. That is due to be scrapped. That will be scrapped on Monday, and it will be reduced to 6 individuals. But outside, I believe you can gather amongst 15 people, though we're not sure. There's been lots of press speculation. In fact, the press speculation actually got the backup of the House of Commons Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, who is really furious that so much is leaking to the press before it's actually been delivered in the House of Commons. But we are expecting a confirmation of that. And that's because over the past 7 days, there have been a severe increase in the amount of positive COVID-19 cases, up to 3,000. And we haven't seen that number since May. Last night, Bolton, a town in the north of England, was the latest region to be given a local lockdown. They also have a curfew between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. And there are major concerns that Boris Johnson may indeed put that into the entire country, the entire 4 nations. So we're waiting and seeing. But this is a worrying case, particularly as it goes against what Boris Johnson was saying last week when the House of Commons and MPs came back from their summer break. He said it's safe to go out there. People should be going to work. People should be going to school. But now, of course, he's reversing that, seeing as we're seeing an increase in cases.
I mean, it's important to actually get the economy working again. So that's something that a lot of leaders will actually support. But let's talk about the Scottish and Welsh governments that have sharply criticized the Westminster's plans for a post-Brexit UK-wide internal market. Talk to us about the key issues there.
You're going to have to bear with me, Temple, because there's a lot of legislation and details within this internal white paper, the Northern Ireland Protocol. I've got to tell you, at the moment, Boris Johnson really is on the ropes, and this is causing a major storm here in Britain. We all know that Britain formally left the European Union on the 31st of January. We still are abiding by EU rules because there's this transition period which ends at the end of this year. And during this period, Downing Street and Brussels have been trying to secure free trade deals so things can run smoothly, but we have our own rules. Well, partly due to COVID, partly due to fist pumping, we haven't been able to secure a deal. And this is now the 8th round of negotiations that's kicking off this week. But over the weekend, the Financial Times were the first to speculate that the British government were tampering with the Withdrawal Agreement. This is an international treaty. It was voted by members of the House of Commons overwhelmingly, because we know that Boris Johnson has an 80-seat majority. He took that agreement to Brussels. Nobody thought they would accept it. They did. Now the issue is Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is across the water. It shares a border with Ireland. Ireland is part of the European Union. And because of the troubles in the Good Friday Agreement, it was agreed on both sides that there should be no border between the north and the south of Ireland, which would mean that Northern Ireland would have to adhere to some EU rules. And that means there would be a border in the Irish Sea between the rest of the nations and Northern Ireland. That is not going to work. The British government do not want that. They've decided at the final hour, which means they have said on record, they actually said it yesterday, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland did say they are willing to break international law. And by doing that, they've created this internal market treaty. This internal market treaty is a treaty that establishes that all four nations, England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, adhere to the same British rules. This has caused a major issue with Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, who is very pro-Scottish independence. The Welsh First Minister has also been speaking. They believe this is an affront to devolution. Devolution happened in the 90s. They were able to have their own laws. Some of their own laws were devolved to the own nations. But because when these devolved nations were giving their own laws, they were still part of the EU. So it's a huge mess. And as you can see, it's even confusing to hear, I'm sure, which is why it's taken the British government so long. But this is a huge problem for Boris Johnson, because he knows just how much the Scottish government want their independence. In fact, Nicola Sturgeon said that they are going to seek the opportunity to have a referendum. And we've even got some really quite shocking statements from the Welsh First Minister. But I know time is of the essence, but this is a major story, and it's likely to have major ramifications, not just the devolution, but of course the fact that Britain have confirmed they are willing to go against an international treaty that has been signed in law.
That's some really diplomatic problems facing Boris Johnson there. But before I let you go, Juliana, talk us through this interesting story or news for the markets. We understand that David Beckham's got a huge stake in a particular esports company, and here we are seeing them now getting to be listed on the London Stock Exchange as they look for some £220 million or something. Talk us through that. Is it an IPO or a public or private placement, I should say?
It's an IPO, but they're still finalising the details for that. It's called Guild Sports. I've not heard of it before, I've got to tell you, but I'm not a major sports fan. But esports apparently is really popular. Became even more popular during the pandemic. I believe that's when fans watch other people play the sport. A lot of footballers have got into it, including Gareth Bale, who I believe is at Real Madrid. Yes, but this Guild Sports is partly owned by David Beckham. Apparently, they have been pulling in up to 100 million viewers. They decided to help their fans by allowing them to buy some shares. So there's a lot of talk on that. It's not been picked up by traders here in the city because, of course, we've got major issues to face. I'll quickly go through the numbers. The all shares up 0.53%. The FTSE 100 is up by 0.81%, and the FTSE 250 is down by 0.61%. In currencies, the pound is down on the dollar by 0.29%, down on the euro by 0.15%, and down on the Japanese yen by 0.18% at intraday, Temple.
Juliana Olayinka, thank you for crunching those numbers there for us. I appreciate them. Well, we'll be back after this short break with more about South Africa and, of course, the slump in the Q2 GDP numbers. Stay with us. And welcome back to Business Incorporated. Let's go to East Africa, where the World Bank has approved $750 million to the Kenyan government for the development of its arid northeastern region. According to the multilateral lender in a statement, the funds will be used for projects aimed at developing the economy and improve the movement of people and goods, digital connectivity, and access to social services for over 3.2 million people. The World Bank says the fund will target areas covered by the Isiolo-Mandera Regional Road Corridor. And in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation has signed a $100 million trade finance deal with Mizuho Bank of Malaysia. The ITFC, in a statement today, says the financing will help in extending support to member countries of the Islamic Development Bank through the Murabaha structured line of trade finance. It adds that it will also help in its response plan to the COVID-19 pandemic targeted towards supporting both the public and private sector. And this first partnership deal, which was done virtually on Tuesday, according to the IFC, signals the expansion of global collaboration. Now, the Economic Community of West African States has postponed the planned launch of its single currency, the ECO. The body, in a communique issued at the end of the 57th Summit of the Heads of State and Government of ECOWAS, agreed to maintain a gradual approach for the launching of the currency. Now, this also follows the earlier caution from the President Muhammadu Buhari that the program could be in a serious jeopardy unless member states complied with agreed processes. Among other things, the program has been postponed in order to consolidate ECOWAS achievements, while a new roadmap is expected to be developed for the initiative with subsequent launch dates. And still looking at South Africa's economy and how small and medium enterprises are struggling to survive after the GDP data released yesterday, the data shows that many SMEs are believed to have closed down permanently and sacked workers during the lockdown. And of course, unemployment rates probably surging. According to the Minister of Small Business Development, Kumumbudzo Shaveni, small businesses are the heart of South African communities, but many say the government has failed to put supportive measures in place for the SMEs.
Joel Sand owns HB Connect Conferencing and Events based in Sandton, Johannesburg. He says he has to close down his business due to the impact of COVID-19. Although he applied for government's funding with all relevant documentation, he says he was turned down.
Our fantastic government promised us SME relief fund. There was 500 million rand set aside for relief. I haven't heard of one SME company receiving any relief. I've had no relief from our landlords. So it's basically put me in the last 5 months, it's put me in arrears of about 2.5 million rand in debt.
With the closure of HB Connect Conferencing and Events, it is frustrating times for his 21 employees who will also see themselves jobless.
It's bad though, because now we don't know what to do. We've handed over our CVs to other people, but we're not sure if they are going to employ us, because we're only left a few months before the year closes. And most of my colleagues, there's like 21 people here, so it's bad.
Just divided by the road from Sandton is Alexandra Township, where Mohadi Letwalo runs her fashion design business. Her story is no different from Nigel's. She has also applied for the government finance scheme, but says she hasn't received any communication with regard to the status of her business funding application.
I've never received any response, or even heard of anyone that got any response. I mean, like in my circle, not like in general. Like people around me, like maybe I'd say my competitors or people who do the same thing around me.
South Africa's Minister for Small Businesses, Kumbuzo Nchaveni, says out of 35,865 applications received, only 40% of the total were completed. The rest were incomplete.
Of those applications, 21,414 were not complete, and they were referred to SEDA to be assisted to complete their applications. and we approved 1,501 applications. From the statistics, it shows you clearly that the applicants do not get anywhere close to the number of applications we received. We know to date that sitting here, 80% of those who applied for funding, whether at government or everywhere else, did not receive funding during the SMME, the debt relief period, because there was just not sufficient funds available. And this is part of the problem, that we continue to talk about small businesses as drivers of the economy, but we continue to act in favor of big business, but will not prioritize small businesses.
While the 40% the minister speaks about may have seen the light at the end of the tunnel, it's still going to be a long struggle for survival for the remaining 60%. Chief economist at Alexander Forbes, Isaiah Mhlanga, shares the post-COVID outlook for SMEs in South Africa.
A lot of SMEs are going to suffer significantly and are not going to be able to recover, given the change in consumer preferences, the change in consumer behaviors, but also optimizations that are being done by big businesses, which normally procure from small medium enterprises. So there will be permanent loss of some of the SMEs that we are going to see.
SMEs represent more than 90% of businesses, employing between 50 to 60% of the country's workforce across all sectors. Although things are starting to slowly pick up, it's still a very difficult and challenging road ahead for most in the country.
Let's quickly talk about oil, where the futures have clawed back some of the losses they sustained on Tuesday, but a rebound in COVID-19 cases in some countries undermined hopes for a steady recovery in global demand. Now, Brent crude was up 44 cents at $40.22 a barrel after declining below $40 to a barrel for the first time since June 2020. U.S. crude was up by 1.4% at $37.26 a barrel, having fallen nearly 8% in the previous session. Both major oil benchmarks are trading below or trading close to the 3-month lows at this point. COVID-19 outbreaks are threatening to slow down global economic recovery and reduce demand for fuels, from aviation gas to diesel. And gold prices slipped on Wednesday as the United States dollar rose to multi-week highs ahead of monetary policy strategies from major central banks in North America and Europe. Spot gold was down 0.3% to $1,925.20 per ounce, while U.S. gold futures fell marginally by 0.4% to $1,935.20. Elsewhere, platinum was down some 0.4% to $897.94 per ounce on Tuesday. The World Platinum Investment Council changed its forecast for the market in 2020 from a surplus to a deficit. Silver dropped 0.8% to $26.48 per ounce, while palladium was flat at $2,274.63. And that's it on Business Incorporated for today. I'm Temple Ashaju. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.